Hey, Jeff. Um, I don't really have something to start off with because I got started late today. So I thought we'd dive in. On Railtown, it's pretty incredible. We have collectively, this is probably underreported because several people didn't say what they own. And then there's probably a lot of people that don't say at all. But we got to go with the data we have. We have 4,451,954 shares of Railtown, which is somewhat over 3% of the company, which is incredible. I commend all of you. We're gonna I think be a force for not only good, but maybe for some change too. We're going to do it the way hedge funds do it. We're going to have the power. We're going to have the power. Maybe we'll see. We'll see. On Railtown, I don't really have anything new to add, so we can go back over some of the reasons why. We can review some of the reasons to get into it. But I just observed that today's Thursday. Let me just check my calendar. Today is Thursday, the 26th, I think. Yeah. So today's Thursday, the 26th. I don't expect, who knows, anything could happen. But my experience, which might not be worth anything, is that if there's news that's good, companies don't put it out on a Friday. So my guess is we have today and tomorrow to acquire Railtown. Then we have Monday is the 30th of June. So that's the last chance for my prediction, which I think's not going to be correct, that the MOU announced on February 11th would be concluded in June. I no longer feel that way. I think it'll be, I'll explain right now. I think it's going to be the second week of July. I live in Washington, D.C., which is hot, and everybody leaves. If you work for the government, if you work for private industry, they get the hell out of town when it's hot. And so I think this last, I think the Juneteenth holiday 2 weeks ago, they left town. And I wouldn't be surprised if they just stayed because it's so hot. But anyway, it's the 26th now. So we basically got 2 more days in June. I don't expect anything. Now, as soon as I say that, there could be news and the stock's up 10 cents, 20 cents. I continue to believe that Railtown at 40 cents, you're not going to see that price much longer. I believe it'll be valuable at 50 cents, 60 cents, 70 cents, 80 cents, 90 cents, $1, but you just won't be able to buy as many shares. So anyway, when we come around into July, Tuesday is the 1st. That's Canada Day. I don't know what they do up there, but if they have that day off, my guess is they're already taking today. They're leaving town wherever they live, they're leaving tonight, and they'll take Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday as a holiday. So I don't expect anything big and major, possibly until Wednesday or Thursday next week. But up in Canada, they probably won't come back until midday Wednesday. So that leaves Thursday. But then the problem is Friday is our holiday. You holiday, I holiday. Friday is our holiday. So I would expect, at least in this city, I don't know what it's like in New York, people will start leaving on Thursday the 3rd. They'll go to Rehoboth or Delaware, or up in New York, they'll go summering in the Hamptons, but they're going to get out of town on Thursday, I think, and they probably won't come back till Monday or even Tuesday. So for all of these reasons, I now think, and I'm going to have to eat crow with my predictions with I Am Almost Legend, but I now think it'll be maybe the Wednesday the 9th or Thursday the 10th would be the soonest time that both Canada's back to work and the United States is back to work. But it'll still be hot. It'll still be hot. So it's the problem with predictions. So I think 2 weeks. Well, it's not even 2 weeks, really, is it? It's, well, yeah, 2 weeks. I'd say we have 2 weeks before big news, just for the reasons I've explained. I think people are going to be out of the two different countries. However, I don't think that means there couldn't be dribs and drabs of news, because you have to announce things. You can't sit on news. So if there's, I don't know, things like what we've seen the last 2 weeks, we've seen these, I don't know what else to call it, kind of licensing deals or revenue deals. There wasn't any revenue in them, so in the announcement. So I don't know if we can call it that, but my point is, you could still see some sort of announcements like that. Every day that goes by, we get closer to the time that you won't be able to buy Railtown at 40 cents. That's my opinion. And how significant could that be? I think once it breaks 43, it goes to 60, 65. Once it breaks that, I don't, obviously $1 becomes a target, but I think it'll double $1.20, and then maybe pull back to $1 briefly. And then I think it's headed to $2.50. I think Railtown will meet with buying as it crosses the $1 level, the $2 level, the $3 level, the $4 level, the $5 level. There's different pools of money out there that have different parameters for companies they can invest in. And I don't really know how it breaks down. I would assume at $1, it might not be that many, but it would be the smaller funds, the smaller technology funds trying to get a jump on the rest of the crowd at $1. $2, I think you could see more significant, I don't know, would it be family offices, or would it be I don't know about mutual funds but maybe some VC funds, maybe. Anyway, $2 will also be the level where is marginable in many firms. So it's a significant number. But well, anyway, let's just see what happens when we get there. We'll see what happens when we get there. Let me show it to the latecomers. We have, which is just incredible, 4,451,000 shares of Railtown, about 3% of the company. Pretty impressive. How do you like them apples? Let's go down some of this. I didn't really prepare any thing to show you or even a video. I do want to further get some ideas in your head about what might have been, I don't know. I think it was, it was a bully picking a fight with a bigger guy, hoping that their big friend would come in and pick up the fight. But I think there's something else more going on in sort of the West Asia, Middle East, that whole, just basically Asia, Southeast Asia, Eastern Asia, Russian Asia. And we'll if we have time, we'll start. There's a couple, it'll be progressive. But I think what it means, Railtown might be the thing we do, set it, forget it, get it right, sit tight, and we don't have to do anything else. But I really do want to continue on the path of preparing you for commodities and a cycle that's going to be unbelievable for the next, I don't know, decade, 15 years, 20 years. I think the markets are going to have their financial blow-off up first, and there'll be a transition period. I think next year is going to be an inflection point on many different targets or fields of play. So hopefully we'll be in a better position by then to diversify and set your futures on a path of independence, far from the maddening crowd. Anyway, all right, let's see. What's this? I saw an AI partner. I saw a partnership in AI today with NVIDIA, with SYN. Let's look that up. That interests me. Oh, I got to sign in. I always do this. I sit down and I feel like I'm ready to go, and then I'm not. Okay. Let's see what SYN is doing. What's the symbol? CYN. Okay. All right. CYN, sorry. SYN. Ah, there you go. St. Sir St. John Smythe. St. John shares. Sir St. John. Our hire after the company announced it partnered with NVIDIA to showcase its autonomous industrial vehicles at Automatica 2025. Well, bear that in mind, Lawrence. I thank you for pointing that out. That stock's up. What's the high low? Well, it's been destroyed. Lawrence, that stock was $1,600. So it's been destroyed by the criminals. But maybe AI is going to be an area that the criminals get caught short. Wouldn't that be fun? So I'm not recommending this stock because that puts me on alert that there's toxic financing in there. But look what it did. The stock's up. It closed at $5. And with an announcement of a partnership with NVIDIA, it opened at 16, which is where it's trading right now. It was as high as 41. So there can be a lot of volatility in there. The volume went from an average of 30,000 a day, a little bit more than that, to 115 million shares today. So this is something, I'm going to write this down so I don't forget it. This is something, if you could imagine, if you could imagine, because remember, I don't know if I have those charts here still. I probably don't. Because I always take things down so I have more room. But yeah, look at that. Look at the top, our partners, Mila, which is that Montreal Intelligence Center, and then AMII, I don't know exactly who that is. Microsoft and Microsoft's co-cell. And then you've got, I can't quite read that, something hub. And then you've got NVIDIA, UBC, but then AMD. So just imagine if AMD or NVIDIA or Microsoft did a deal with them. You can see the power just of the name being announced. I contend that that's possible at some point. It'll be out of the blue as far as I'm concerned. But it's possible at some point with Railtown. That's great, Lawrence. Thank you. P-Man. Let me write that down. I got to keep a new list for today. Added 1,300 shares. All right. Okay. And then, so I think I understand you. You're adding 1,300. That's not your total. Okay. And then Jim, YouTube user. Good. That's how to do it. Now has 7,100. That's great. That is great. Hey, Jack. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Steve. We're all going to have to, when we see Steve, we're going to have to avert our eyes, not look him in the eyes, and bow as he walks by. I like that idea. I like that idea. He's gonna give me grief. All right. Okay. So he's being easy on me. Um, yeah, that's the problem with making predictions. They're never right. Right now, Railtown is 38 cents bid, 39.5 ask. I'm a little surprised. That's a wide, that's a Senator Alan Craig spread there. Um, Now, because I put CYN in there, I have several stocks in the green. Um, Whoever it was that told me, there's a couple of you that mentioned VVOS. If you want to put something up, go ahead. Um, I don't want to distract people though. I really think this is all right. Let me quickly make my Jennifer disclosure. Um, I have no relationship with Railtown AI Technologies. I do not have a consulting agreement. I do not have a contract with them. I haven't been paid anything. I haven't been gifted anything. I haven't received stock warrants, promise of stock or warrants or cash on Railtown. Although after you all's performance, I think they owe me something. No, just kidding. Um, uh, yeah, that's that. Also, obviously, everything here is opinion and strategy and editorial. It's not financial advice. And let's just leave it at that without going through the whole rundown. You've heard it before. Um, I don't know how to say this, and I realize now I have to be blunt. Otherwise, things are mistaken. Now, uh, I no longer can leave it hanging that I feel good about Nixie. I don't feel good about Nixie. Now, that doesn't mean Nixie couldn't double or triple from here. The stock is 177 to 178. So, by my telling you that I'm negative on Nixie, I can still be wrong and the stock goes up. But it doesn't mean I'm wrong to be negative. It doesn't mean I'm wrong to be negative. Anything can happen in any stock at any time. And as sure as I'm saying to you that I can no longer, uh, I don't know what word to use. I can no longer, uh, I can't think. I wish I had I am almost legends vocabulary. Um, anyway, I'm not comfortable with the impression that I think you should own Nixie. I don't think you should. Um, that doesn't mean that it couldn't have a miracle. There couldn't be a run, but I would put Nixie in the category of a ZJYL or a GDC, that it's a company where there's uh, large shareholders who own the majority of the float, the majority of the stock, and it could run someday. It could be a miracle. So I want you to know that there could be those reasons. But what makes me uncomfortable with Nixie is I feel like I'm flying blind. They lost their auditor. We don't know why. But that to me, that's not a good, it's a red flag. And it's going to take time. to get, or it should. I don't know an auditor that gets anything done quickly. So I think that's a red flag. Their last announcement, and I was discussing this yet again with somebody because I noticed it, and it bugs me enough to bring it up. If we go to Yahoo and look at the news, now the revenues are amazing. What they project is amazing. But I got to find the one that there's more than one announcement. So the last announcement, May 23rd, they recorded over 1.39 million in revenue. And that's pretty straightforward, pretty standard. Nixie is entering in the AI-powered voice and messaging space. Okay. But that seems very commodity-like, but all right. But then you go down, generating unaudited revenue of approximately 1.4 million. Well, they lost their auditor. So what does it mean? I don't know. But it makes me uncomfortable as someone that used to, do this for a living. I wouldn't leave my clients sitting there with the impression that all is well. I don't know. But that makes it a decision. Let's step away from it. If you don't know, step away from it. There's plenty of other stocks like Railtown to make money in. But then you go to, I can't remember which month it was that bugged me. Here, this is on June 4th. Nixie also reported that it generated approximately 5.2 million in unaudited gross revenue. What the hell does that mean? Gross revenue. Unaudited gross revenue. Everybody's revenue is gross unless something's going on, unless that revenue isn't theirs or they have to split it with somebody. I don't know what it means. So I'm just letting you know that I think Nixie's high risk. Everything down here is high risk, but I don't think Nixie has I'll just say that I do not feel comfortable with Nixie because the auditor's not in place. I don't understand this terminology, and I've asked around. No one gives me a good answer. What is unaudited gross revenue? Why do you have to put that gross in there? And it's unaudited. It's going to stay unaudited because they don't have an auditor, although they did announce one. But anyway, if I'm clear and if I'm not being clear, I can't give you financial advice, but I think Nixie should be sold. Doesn't mean it could double, it could triple, it could go back to 6, just like I always thought it would. But if it does, that doesn't mean that my call right here is wrong. Why? Because I think there's just enormous risk in the stock. I think it would be better to wait until they get their audit sorted and there's a little more clarity. I'd rather be out and get away from the risk that it goes to 20 cents and miss that it doubles or triples, because nobody can, as we just found out, nobody can completely see the future. So my gut is telling me, and I've done this before with other stocks, GTII and others, where I guess I thought I was being clear. So I'm going to just state it. I think Nixie should be sold. It should not be owned. But that doesn't mean if you want to, if in your financial position you believe it's a hold, it doesn't mean that there won't someday be the combination of events and stories, and the revenue projections that they give are outstanding. But I don't know. I think there's other stories to look at. And like I just said, if anyone wants to give me their feelings on VOOM, Vivos, VOS, VVOS, that's intriguing. But I don't want you, I'm not recommending anything other than RLAIF in my educational way right now. To me, there's no other stock that you should focus on. Railtown is 40 cents. Look at these stocks. Nixie's $1.77. I think Railtown could be $1.77 in 3 weeks. Lars Nootbaar just got an injection in his intercoastal region. One would wonder what that region is. And then one would feel some sympathy for Lars. All right, let's not be too negative. And just because I feel that way doesn't mean it's not. If you have an account where you can set it aside and you can tolerate the risk, it's already down. Maybe there's a better price to get out of it. I can't micromanage the decisions, but I just want you to be clear where I stand on Nixie. Wow, the United States is thinking about easing sanctions on Iran. Bravo, and helping them with a nuclear program, a non-enrichment program, which will lead into my thoughts here. There was a good bond auction. It's good news. That's something Trump. I think Trump may have done something quite remarkable, and I forget how I reacted. I don't know. I don't know that I went full blown negative, but I was frightened. I was totally frightened by the momentum that was getting ahead of steam to go to war with Iran. And I don't think we're out of the woods. I think Israel is the government, a bunch of dishonest people. They will take a ceasefire, and they'll take time to rebuild their, whatever it's called, Sword of Samson or David's stone or whatever they call their anti-ballistic missile shield. They'll just rebuild it. They were running out. They're a bully. They said, "Oh, stop hurting me. Oh, that hurts." And now they'll build it back up again. That's how I see them. But on the other hand, I think Trump just lost it with Netanyahu. He's sick of him. like every other president's gotten sick of Netanyahu. So maybe what Trump did by going in there with this drama is he popped the emotion of the invasion, and now we're moving on. And he may have headed off the catalyst for World War III. So I'm kind of impressed. Count me as impressed. I still think Israel's finished as a white colonial supremacist, mono-religion nation. I think it's finished. I think the women will leave with their children and go back to Brooklyn, maybe go to Australia. The men might hang out for a while, but then they're going to realize there's no business to be done. Larry Fink will get rich rebuilding downtown Tel Aviv, but I don't think anyone will be there. And old guys like we maybe still have some sort of perception of I don't know what to call it, loyalty to Israel. But the younger generations, they don't even remember who Bill Clinton is. They don't remember who George W. Bush is. I watched some videos. They don't know who the Beatles are, the Rolling Stones. They've never listened to Boz Scaggs. They've never, guys, it's a lot to ask them to even remember World War II or World War I. So I think there's not a lot of friends down below as we go into our dotages and die. I don't think the young people are going to be all for this homicidal murder of another population. I don't think it's going to happen. So anyway, I think Israel overstepped, and I don't think they're going to recover. I did notice, and I was going to print it out, but there's a lot of gas off the coast of Gaza Strip. Enormous amount of gas off the coast of Israel. It's called the Leviathan Field, and there's more than one field. It's a real question. Who does that gas belong to? The Palestinians who were there all along, or Israel who took over the country 77 years ago? I don't know. I'll let other people look at that, but I studied economics, I studied government, a little bit of history, but to me, it's always about the resources. You can code it in all manner of moral moral issues. I can't say that other word, but it always comes down to resources and money and the banks. So, yeah, let's see. What are wearables? What are wearables? So Kennedy is going to launch that we should all use wearables. I guess that's like the Apple Watch or something. That would be, if you know how to invest in the components of wearables, that would be an investment worth jumping in on. I don't know what a wearable is, but I know she wears it well. You wear it well. All right, I'm just checking to see if we're not at war. More food companies to remove artificial dyes. That's great. All right, let's get back to work. I'm sorry, I got distracted. Um, all right, account settings. I think you'll get a chance to add more today, tomorrow, probably first part of next week. Thank you, Lawrence, for the partnership with NVIDIA. I think that's great information. Let's get to 5 million. Yeah, I like that. We're basically at 4.5 million, not quite, but we're not too far away from 4.5. No, I know you're not recommending buying. I'm not upset. I'm glad you pointed it out because um, I think it's already moved, so it's risky not knowing anything. And I think they have that they must have toxic financing. But it's a powerful observation on your part. Just making a deal with NVIDIA in the AI space, the stock jumps. Imagine if Railtown did a deal with, their list of people up there, they're already partners with them. What if they announced some sort of deal with one of those eight or nine partners? I would, some of them no one would know, like Mila or some of those others. But imagine if we got lucky and there was some sort of tie-up beyond that, joining their partnership programs, some sort of tie-up with AMD or a NVIDIA or a Microsoft. Maybe you get that kind of. That's what I'm talking about. That's why I think you have to establish your position, or at least a position in Railtown, because we could wake up any morning and there's suddenly a something like what just happened to Sin. I look like Henry Winkler. Well, I told you that I met uh, Henry Winkler in London at a bar called Janet's off of Bro- Old Brompton Road. I think that's the name. It might be Brompton Road. Right at the right at the I can't remember the name of that tube stop. South Ken maybe. But anyway, I used to go into Janet's. She hailed from somewhere, New York or upstate New York or somewhere, and she would she would allow drinks. What I don't know what it's like now, but in London, every drink was measured. She would actually free pour and mix them, mix them, um, and then she'd stay open late beyond the time that all the pubs closed. But she had to know you. She'd close the door and she'd always shh, tell everybody to be quiet. But I used to go in there and it was fun. I met people there and I made friends with her. But one of her, maybe by marriage or some other friendship, she knew she's good, very close to Henry Winkler, and he came into town. He took up a seat at uh, along the wall. I was at the bar, and people were talking about him, and I don't know. I looked at him, said hello, and I went over and sat with him. He's a very nice guy. We talked and shared a bit, and then I don't think I ever got it. I might have gotten a picture. I don't know, but I wouldn't. I would have been uncomfortable asking for a picture with him. But anyway, I didn't think to say to him that I looked like Henry Winkler. I usually don't get that. I usually get that I look like Bob Baffert or Steve Martin, the white hair, or some guy that goes woo, yells woo. But anyway, tell your mother that, hey, what did he say, the Fonz? John Croissant. Did you hear Richard's finger video concerns today? No, but list them. I don't want to guess because I might bring up things that he didn't mention. Somebody said that or it was on let me just look. I got somebody sent me a text, and this Kaiser Solsay guy, Teren Pizer. Look, he's been in all the disclosures and all the filings, but he's a no good Nick, this Teren Pizer. I mean, he's a short seller. That's what he made his fortune breaking securities laws, as I understand it, at best of my information. And I don't know. I've never met the guy, but I think he made hundreds of millions of dollars shorting stocks illegally. And I guess maybe he put some back into finger. I don't think it in and of itself is some great aha moment, at least as it pertains to Kaiser Solsay, Teren Pizer. But I don't know. There might be more there. Certainly an attorney would be very good at digging in there and finding out what's wrong, if there is anything. But I don't, I'm not somebody, I love hanging around with people with money because there's usually beautiful women and travel and interesting topics and things to do and all that. But I'm not someone enamored just because someone has a lot of money. It doesn't make me think they're somehow great. And just because somebody doesn't have money doesn't make me think any less of them. This is a guy, Kaiser Solsay, who I don't care how rich he is. I think he stole the money, and I don't, I think that's my impression of him, but I don't know him. All I know is he made fortunes breaking securities laws. $7,100. I think I wrote that down. Yeah, I did. Thank you. That's a good job. Ernest 34. All right. Awesome. We're up to, I think, I can't remember. I think we're almost 90 people that have at least said. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Buongiorno. She wore it well. All right, let's just quickly, since there's a lull in the action, let's just try to get across, as I ever do, a little bit of education from the eyes of different smart people. Dr. Stephen Lieb, one of the easily one of the most enthusiastic guys you'll ever see when he's talking and sharing ideas, but a pretty smart guy. We talked the other day about his chapter 4, which was the coming infrastructure explosion, particularly because of China and its initiatives with other countries. Well, his second part of that story is chapter 5, the coming infrastructure explosion, part 2. And I don't think it's a particularly long chapter compared to the first one, so we can blast through it. And I won't read it word for word. So he's saying, you know, most people missed the headline, but on September 7th, 2013, China issued a statement, quote, President Xi delivers important speech and proposes to build a Silk economic belt with Central Asian countries, unquote. That's what I think can be behind what's going on here with Iran. They finished this rail access to China, so they can send oil by rail, just like we used to, just like the Rockefellers used to do in the States. It was an important speech indeed. This was the first public iteration of Xi's ambitious expansion plan to link by land and sea economies of Central Asia and South Asia with China and each other and with lands beyond, evoking the old Silk Road traveled by Marco Polo in the 13th century. The initial plan had two parts, a land route called the Silk Road Economic Belt and a waterway route called the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road. Together they made up what Xi first called China's One Belt, One Road initiative, later named the Belt and Road Initiative. Whatever you call it, it was a giant undertaking while the United States bombed deserts and assaulted mountains and made sure everything was woke in their path and picked a fight with the Soviet Union. It was a giant undertaking that China started quickly and has expanded rapidly ever since. Within fairly short order, the project extended to more than 65 countries with a combined gross domestic product of at least $23 trillion. That's before the Belt Road Initiative, a combined domestic product of 23 trillion. That's before the benefit of essentially a highway system to make trade easier. And the population, 4.4 billion people, roughly 62% of the world's population and 30% of the world's global economic output. By 2019, the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, had activities and arrangements with 120 countries in all corners of the globe while we bombed deserts. It is estimated that China eventually will invest between $1 trillion and $8 trillion US in the BRI projects. The initiative reaches into the Arctic with the so-called Polar Silk Road and extends into Eastern Europe. It encompasses projects in South America, including Brazil, where China is installing ultra-high voltage power lines using the technology and expertise it learned and applied domestically in China. In 2019, Italy became the first major Western European country to participate in BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, as it welcomed a commitment by China, Italy did, to upgrade 3 Italian ports. They saved the Sambuca for later. Later in the year, the small German city of Arnstadt welcomed the overtures of a Chinese company to invest more than $2 billion to build a factory which will produce batteries for electric cars. This was published 3 years ago. BRI has been called the largest development project in modern history. Initially, it was compared with the Marshall Plan, but its scope has grown larger than the Marshall Plan. The initiative accounts for a large chunk of the coming infrastructure explosion which lies ahead. It truly is an example of China thinking long term, of having the vision thing, to using a phrase made famous by George H.W. Bush. This vision begins with China as the hub. This vision begins with China as the hub of a vast eastern trading region connected and made prosperous with the help of a China-funded infrastructure and energy investments. And it allows this area to let China set the rules of the road. Beyond its economic goals, it has clear geopolitical ramifications, further elevating China's position as a world leader, world power. Dr. Lieb says, I wasn't inside Xi's head when he first began thinking, but I wouldn't have understood anything he said anyway, about refining ideas for the BRI, Belt Road Initiative, which follows and builds on, but vastly enlarges the scope of earlier Chinese moves to forge ties with developing countries, whilst the United States bombs deserts and assaults mountains. But I could imagine him looking one evening at a map of the world and saying to himself, Xi, well now Xi, look at all these sleepy and resource-rich countries right in our neighborhood. Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan. Not all that much going on there. I've heard they hardly trade among themselves at all. What a waste and what an opportunity. Let's put some money in them. Help build roads and rail terminals, anything, factories, pipelines. Let's get something going. That will get economic activity there humming, which will bring in future investment. And wouldn't that be nice for them and for us too? Because who are they going to trade with if not China? And let's focus on transportation projects. Let's make it easier for people and goods to travel from the Pacific to the Baltic Sea. Connectivity, that's the ticket. That's the word to stress. Lots of energy projects too. Can't run an economy without reliable energy. We don't even have a reliable grid here as we bomb deserts and assault mountains. Um, Perhaps he told himself, Xi, I really am a genius, because why stop with Central Asia? We can take these regional links further or farther, extending them all the way to developed countries of Europe, which, trust me, are going to be dying to be part of this thing once they realize the potential. That's what I don't understand why Germany doesn't hop on board. But his point is Europe's going to be lining up to join, because once they realize how many of millions of people in the East will have money to spend, this could be a heck of a way to deal with China's excess manufacturing capacity, bailing out all of our factories, which helped propel China's breakneck growth this century, but now we're producing more steel and cement than we know what to do with. What a perfect solution. Just shift the demand elsewhere. Keep our economy growing at the same time. And we could have a port in India's neighborhood. And we could link with China's pesky western provinces closely aligned with Pakistan. Speaking of Pakistan and that deep water port, Gwadar, if we build it up, it will surely make shipping oil from the Middle East to China a lot faster and cheaper. I'll have to check the numbers tomorrow. Too tired tonight. He's talking to himself. But a rough back of the envelope guess, it should cut the miles in half, and it would solve our Malacca dilemma. In other words, oil wouldn't have to go through the Straits of Malacca. And finally, he might be thinking, China mustn't forget about soft power. If we're the ones building infrastructure, we're the ones who can set technical standards for rail and other industries. It's a very important advantage to us. So anyway, he's speculating that's what's going on in the mind of China. So then Xi made a statement in May of 2017, quote, in pursuing the Belt and Road Initiative, we should focus on the fundamental issue of development, release the growth potential of various countries, and achieve economic integration and interconnected development and deliver benefits to all. Whilst the United States bombs deserts and assaults mountains. The U.S. view. When Xi first announced the initiative in 2013, it didn't get much attention from the Western press, way too focused on Kim Kardashian's derriere. Now, more than half a decade past the launch, the West has definitely taken notice, usually in a negative way. Almost every article that mentions the Belt and Road Initiative contains a boilerplate sentence exuding skepticism about the initiative's goals and implementation. You could easily assume two rather contradictory things. One is that the Belt and Road Initiative really isn't going to work very well, and it's running into pushback from these countries. Secondly, contradictorily, in an opposite conclusion, that the Belt and Road Initiative is going all too well, and it represents a threat to Western interests and the dominance the West must resist. This might be what was going on here in Iran. A common theme is that in investing huge sums in infrastructure projects, China essentially has played a trick on the countries it purportedly is helping. One frequent assertion is that China's loans come with onerous terms that leave participating countries flailing in a debt trap. That sounds more like us. And then they'll cede vital interests to China. Sounds more like us. Other raps are that the infrastructure projects are being funded are poorly conceived, or they damage the environment, or they're using Chinese workers rather than local workers. The United States has tried to steer potential BRI recipient countries away from China. Most BRI countries are not persuaded. But let's agree that you can question China's motives and lending terms. Let's agree that China should be more environmentally conscious. Let's agree anything you want. The point is that focusing on those concerns, whether they're legitimate or not, is a bit like having an elephant saunter into your living room and you get worked up because it has mud on its feet. Yes, it would have been better if the elephant had wiped its feet first, but you do now have an elephant in the living room. For investors, the key takeaway from the Belt and Road Initiative should be that it is fostering infrastructure creation on an enormous scale. In itself, the infrastructure creation ensures demand for commodities. Even more to the point, improved infrastructure will propel economic growth throughout the developing world, keeping demand for commodities humming long after the roads and rails and air terminals and energy pipelines have been completed. Whatever your ideology or politics, this is the reality. And it all points to higher gold prices. BRI is big, multifaceted, and continually evolving. It's an enormous global grab bag of projects financed through generally low interest rate loans by an array of Chinese companies. But some of the projects are more significant than others. The biggest BRI undertaking, and this is where I wanted to get, is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It stretches 3,000 kilometers from Kashgar in China's far western province of Xinjiang to Pakistan's deepwater port of Gwadar on the Arabian Sea. It was formalized in 2015, and it initially encompassed 51 separate agreements and additional memoranda for highways, railways, energy installations along the corridor. Energy and transportation make up the lion's share of the projects. China first planned to invest 46 billion over 10 years, 10 to 15 years. The figure has since been raised to 62 billion. To compare it, just so you know, the original 46 billion was more than double all foreign direct aid, direct investment in Pakistan since 2008. A key component was the enlargement of this Gwadar port which is near the Persian Gulf. Pakistan leased the port through 2059 to the state-owned Chinese Overseas Ports Holding Company. A special economic zone next to the port is due for completion now. The importance of Pakistan of China's investments was highlighted in a long paper in 2018. The author was Ashan Iqbal, who at the time was the federal minister for planning, developments, and reform in Pakistan. He said, quote, "This is the basic essence of BRI, this huge network of corridors. Connectivity is going to bring new demand and growth in the world economy," unquote. Since then, it's no secret that Pakistan's economy has soured. Growth has declined, foreign reserves are down, and etc. Some commentators have argued that this CPEC, this series of agreements, deserve the blame for increasing Pakistan's debt load. And some say that the projects were poorly conceived, and any further progress will be limited. But Voice of America has reported that after completion of the first 22 projects, this CPEC has entered its next stage. The next stage will include an international airport at Gwadar, creation of 9 industrial zones, and those eventually should improve Pakistan's foreign reserve posture by boosting Pakistani exports. A recent study by Moody's shows why the BRI will add to global growth, and also shows why the debt burden is less problematic than painted. The study describes the strong links between improved infrastructure, increased trade, and stronger growth. It highlighted an estimate by the World Bank that these infrastructure improvements by BRI will increase trade by as much as 4% a year. The bottom line is that BRI is for real and that it's big. It's not a blip or a passing fancy. You can't ignore its impact just because you don't like all that China is doing. It will continue to expand and to accelerate growth in developing economies. And this is truly consequential. The developing world has become more significant to global growth than the developed world, giving it unprecedented influence over what happens everywhere, including in your own portfolio. You can draw a connecting line between growth in the developing world and a bull market in gold. All right, that was that paragraph. That was that chapter. All right, Railtown is trading 38.7 to 39.81, 74,000 shares. Not very much volume, but the bid is almost 39 cents. What concerns about Finger? Who said that? All right, up here, John. So Beth, I don't know. The only thing I saw, is somebody sent me a copy of a Twitter thing, and it was linked. It was linked to a comment from Not Legal Advice saying, Finger is Taryn Pizer, just convicted of securities fraud, still a material. Oh, sorry. He says Finger is the way to highlight the post. So you got to start with, and partly it's my eyesight. Is Taryn Pizer, just convicted of securities fraud, still a material shareholder of the company? Well, crooks can buy stock too. It doesn't mean that the company is crooked, but that's the only concern that I saw. I don't know if there's any other concerns out there. But I guess Not Legal Advice has done a thorough forensic study of GTII, and maybe he's going to do it now with Finger. I don't know. It says here, irony, as I understand it, Pizer, in exchange for immunity, testified against Michael Milken. I don't know. I don't know what the concerns are. Maybe John could, just put one word or two up and we could talk about it, but I don't know what the concerns are. Yeah, I can't. I mean, this Taryn Pizer, it's been in the filings for a long time. It's not Legal Advice has discovered something that others haven't known. It's not a stroke of genius to put it out there. But for some reason, he wants people to maybe look askance at Finger because this guy's a major shareholder. I don't know what to say about that. I'm just trying to think in my memory, and I don't think the company ever did business with Taryn Pizer, at least that I know about. And I asked about it. I've asked about it. I just don't see that it has any relevance to how the company is run or management or what they're trying to do. But there's a very interesting, they're doing the Roth Capital presentation. I guess today it's already happened. And let's see if the stock price is reflecting anything. I don't have Finger here. Let me get it. Yeah, it's up 3 cents, 3.5 cents, 134,000 shares. Is this good news or bad news? On June 25th, the federal, this is called, according to Tyler Durden, 5.5 trillion in balance sheet capacity unlocked. On June 25th, the Federal Reserve announced changes to the supplementary leverage ratio that aims to ensure that leverage is a capital backstop for the banking industry, as opposed to a binding constraint. Yeah. According to an analysis from Goldman Sachs, says Richard Ramsden, the bank believes that the changes to the SLR, that's the supplementary leverage ratio calculation, should increase the availability, and maybe at a lower cost, of short-term secured financing for market participants, improving liquidity in the financial markets and the U.S. Treasury market in particular. These changes will be somewhat beneficial for banks. It will give the industry more flexibility to provide short-term secured financing and potentially to buy more U.S. Treasuries. I don't know if that's a good sign or not. The bank that would see the largest increase in balance sheet capacity is Bank of America, followed by Wells Fargo and Citi. "60 days away." I don't know. It goes on and on. I don't want to read it all, but I don't know if that's a sign that there's trouble underlying the market, that they have to give a rule to expand liquidity. I don't know. IRS sheds 26% of staff as federal workforce is pared down. They're starting to rev up this war with Iran again. All right, let's see what you're talking about. All right, Giuseppe, that Friday to Monday auditor news shook me out. More ammo for Railtown. Yeah, I think that's I think it's a completely logical reaction to the auditor news. Could still be, it still could be I don't know what word to use. I mean, there's always a possibility the stock does fine, but I think it's just a huge red flag, and it's not worth these stocks are already have all the odds stacked against them. It's not worth staying in something that has such a red flag, in my opinion. We can always change our mind later, but at least you preserve your capital and put it somewhere else that could do much better. John says, watch Richard's video. He no longer owns Finger shares. Well, that's certainly, he's an attorney. I don't think he's, a financial guy, but I don't know. I don't own Finger either, so for whatever that's worth. All right, it's almost 3:00. Railtown 3921. We might have to end early today because I can't think of anything to fill the space. Let me just look and see if my old friend. Nope, it's not new. Oh, that's right. You got to sign in. Yeah. Annoying. Yeah. All right. Maybe I have to teach you something else. That's a very interesting article. I think I read it to you before, though. Yeah, I probably shouldn't do it again because I think I did it before. It's very interesting, though. So, I don't know. We've got an hour, so maybe I should just do it. This is Matthew Simmons talking about Saudi Arabia and the roots of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in his book, Twilight in the Desert. And so the roots of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia go back to January 15th, 1902, when Abdulaziz, also known as King Ibn Saud, gathered a large group of warriors to capture Riyadh. Prior to this raid, most of Arabia had been controlled for several centuries by the Rashid Arab clan aligned with the waning Ottoman Empire. The victorious Abdulaziz expelled the Rashid dynasty forever from what ultimately became Saudi Arabia. And there he is, Abdulaziz. After capturing Riyadh, Abdulaziz embarked on a series of campaigns to subdue additional towns and consolidate his control. In January of 1926, Abdulaziz became the king of Hajjah and the Sultan of Najd, and thus established his authority over most of the territory of modern Saudi Arabia. As Abdulaziz conquered the Arabian Peninsula, some of his most powerful supporters were the Ikhwan, the strictest, most zealous group within the Islamic Wahhabi sect. Once his power was secure, Abdulaziz turned on these strict but unruly Wahhabists, and after 4 bloody, battle-ridden years, finally brought them under his control. But the religious fanaticism of this group never ebbed and played a dominant role in preserving the strict religious control that is still evident in Saudi Arabia today. After almost 3 decades of warfare and political consolidation, on September 22, 1932, Abdulaziz finally declared his realm, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, by merging the Hajjah and Najd realms. He ruled this new kingdom for 21 additional years. While he remained quite obscure throughout his life outside of the kingdom, he was truly one of the 20th century's most dynamic and intriguing characters. Historians still debate the extent to which Abdulaziz was involved in the development of Saudi Arabia's oil. And as we'll detail later, a series of advisors such as Frank Holmes, St. Philby, Charles Crane, Carl Twitchell, and others played roles in convincing Abdulaziz to grant oil concessions that ultimately led to this discovery of the world's greatest collection of supergiant fields. But the king played a canny role in orchestrating the early development of Saudi Arabian oil resources. Did he suspect that his barren kingdom might have such rich petroleum deposits? Or were fate and luck the key determinants? Given the lack of records and the limited written history of Saudi Arabia's early years, definitive answers to these questions may never be known. What is clear, however, is that by the time Abdulaziz finally consolidated his power, his new kingdom was poor, extremely poor. Its only source of real money came from fees charged to Muslims on the annual pilgrimage to Mecca. When Aziz finally became king, the global depression had reduced the flow of pilgrims to a trickle, and the royal family of the new kingdom teetered on the brink of insolvency. Their need for hard currency was so urgent that an oil company might have been expected to hold the clear upper hand in negotiations for an oil concession. That an oil company might take a gamble at all on the unknown geology of Arabia at that time is somewhat surprising, since most oil companies were struggling to stave off insolvency as the depression deepened and oil prices fell to 10 cents a barrel. 10 cents a barrel, good gosh. As he battled to control Arabia, Abdulaziz was acutely aware of the potential for political disruption and violence stalking his kingdom and the entire Middle East as a result of Zionist efforts to create a Jewish homeland in Palestine. In fact, Abdulaziz was among the first Arab leaders to warn that a Jewish homeland in the Muslim-dominated region posed serious risks for the Middle East and the world. The prominent role that Abdulaziz tried to play during the crucial years of the Zionist campaign has been overlooked by many Middle Eastern historians. And while the story has limited relevance to Saudi Arabia's oil development, it does shed some light on King Faisal's use of the oil sword to trigger the 1973 oil shock. In 1937, Abdulaziz spoke at length to Sir Percy Cox's deputy, H.R.P. Dixon, about the millennium-long hatred, that true adherents to the Muslim faith had toward Jews, and urged the British government to maintain Palestine under British sovereignty, ruling it, if necessary, for another 100 years, rather than partitioning it to create a Jewish state. In March of 1943, Abdulaziz invited representatives from Life magazine to Riyadh to proclaim his strong opposition to Jewish immigration to Palestine. During this visit, he retold the story of the region and gave his reasons for rejecting all arguments used to validate the Jewish claim to a homeland in the region. Abdulaziz came face to face with the world leaders only rarely. The most prominent meetings took place in 1945 when he secretly conferred with both President Franklin Roosevelt and Prime Minister Winston Churchill. These visits occurred late in Abdulaziz's life on the occasion of FDR's last trip outside the United States before his death 2 months later. After FDR left the gathering of Allied leaders at Yalta in February 1945, he secretly flew to Egypt and boarded a Navy vessel, the USS Quincy, which steamed to the Great Bitter Lake. The purpose of his trip was to meet three kings, Farouk of Egypt, Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, and Abdul Aziz ibn Saud of Saudi Arabia. The journey to meet FDR was one of the few trips during his long life that Abdulaziz made out of his kingdom. On the way to this meeting in the Marat area of Saudi Arabia, the king shared his vehemence about a Jewish homeland with a crowd of his staunch supporters. Abdulaziz told them of the progress of the war and what place the Arab nations should claim in the world when the war ended. He warned his supporters of the dangers if Zionists dared to drive a small and weak nation of Palestinians from their own land. These views were a key component of the positions Abdulaziz brought to his meeting with Roosevelt, which is interesting because he died 2 months later, and then Truman came on. On Valentine's Day, King Ibn Saud was lifted onto the Quincy in his wheelchair to meet the American president, the most powerful leader in the world, who was also wheelchair bound. Jim Bishop, in his book FDR's Last Year, eloquently characterized this historic visit as, quote, two sick men facing each other in their respective wheelchairs, unquote. Roosevelt led off the discussion by speculating on the wonders to be achieved if all the arid land in Saudi Arabia and Egypt could be made to flourish and bloom. The king, in a most respectful manner, said he was not interested in the subject of water. He spoke to FDR about his love for the desert. He went on to explain that he was simply a warrior, nothing more, nothing less. He had spent a lifetime fighting recalcitrant tribes to establish his kingdom, and now he was nearing the end of his days. The thought of making deserts bloom was a good one, but there should still be a place for deserts. Deserts were good, not bad. This was a true Bedouin talking candidly to a true aristocrat. As the meeting between these two old warriors extended into several hours, their friendship grew. Roosevelt said he was particularly interested in the Palestine question. King Ibn Saud said, quote, "You mean the Jews," unquote, and then went on to say, quote, "When peace comes, when World War II ends, the Jews should be returned to the lands from which they have been driven, not sent to Palestine," unquote. I didn't know this chapter was going to be this detailed on this subject at all. The king was clearly very alarmed about the pace at which Jews were buying Palestinian land and acquiring arms to fight the Palestinian Arabs. Once World War II ended, Abdulaziz warned FDR that if the Jews came to Palestine, they would establish a culture entirely different from the Arabs. This would eventually lead to armed conflict between the Muslim world and the Jewish people. As a true believer, King Ibn Saud told FDR he would then be forced to fight on the side of the Arabs. To prevent this chaos, Ibn Saud urged that a Jewish European homeland be created instead. After the king departed the USS Quincy, FDR reportedly told Harry Hopkins that he had learned more about the Arab-Jewish situation from Ibn Saud in 5 minutes than he had from others over the whole course of his lifetime. According to Jim Bishop, Hopkins would enjoy telling others, quote, "The only thing FDR really learned was that the Arabs don't want any more Jews in their neighborhoods," unquote. So then the question is, did King Ibn Saud and President Roosevelt discuss oil? Whether or not oil entered the 5-hour conversation between FDR and the king is not recorded. It would be odd if it did not. An American oil company had made the first 2 significant oil discoveries in Saudi Arabia several years earlier, and one field was then in production. Abdulaziz was eager to further develop Saudi Arabia's bonds with the United States as a balance to the strong British influence in the region. Access to Middle East oil was an Axis objective in World War II and the reason behind the North African campaign. And Roosevelt was keenly aware of the oil potential in Saudi Arabia. During the height of the war in 1943, Roosevelt instructed Harold Ickes, U.S. Secretary of the Interior, to dispatch a senior delegation to inspect Saudi Arabia's oil resource. The Allies were gearing up for a massive offense in Southeast Asia, and it had to be fueled by Middle East oil because U.S. reserves of oil could not sustain the wartime drain of 2 billion barrels of oil a year. De Goyer, the world's most distinguished geologist, returned to the United States, and he reported to Roosevelt that the center of gravity for oil production would soon be shifting from the American Caribbean area to the Middle East Persian Gulf area. He estimated the kingdom's resources at 2 billion barrels of proven reserves, 5 billion barrels of probable reserves, and 20 billion barrels of possible reserves. A day after his meeting with FDR, Abdulaziz met with Winston Churchill in Cairo. It seems that Churchill may have confused Abdulaziz with a member of Iraq's royal family. This confusion highlights the obscurity of Saudi Arabia, even as World War II was coming to an end. FDR was clearly impressed with Abdulaziz, oil or no oil. After FDR returned to the United States, he penned a handwritten note to the king, dated April 4th, 1945, reiterating his pledge that no decision would be taken with respect to the Palestine issue without fully consulting both Arabs and the Jews. He ended the note by assuring the king, quote, "I will take no action in my capacity of chief of the executive branch of this government, which might prove hostile to the Arab people," unquote. 8 days later, FDR was dead. During this brief but potentially profound friendship between FDR and Abdulaziz, it is unlikely that either leader glimpsed the powerful position the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would occupy once it became the world's most important oil supplier, nor the violence which would engulf Middle East politics. Had these two old warriors each been 20 years younger and had their brief acquaintance blossomed whilst they were young, it's not hard to imagine that the history of the Middle East might have taken a different course. Only weeks before FDR died, he apparently suggested to his wife Eleanor that he would like to travel back to the Middle East after he left office and become more engaged in seeing that part of the world grow. Abdulaziz viewed the danger embedded in creating a Zionist state in the Middle East with great passion. To make his views more widely known, he sent his favorite son, Prince Faisal, to the international gathering in San Francisco that created the United Nations. Faisal appealed to the United States to honor FDR's promise to hear Saudi concerns about creating a Jewish state in Palestine. His appeal was ignored, and he returned to Saudi Arabia nurturing a deep resentment against the United States for not supporting a key ally and instead tilting toward the establishment of a secular Jewish state. These resentments may have influenced Faisal's action 25 years later when, as the king of Saudi Arabia, he used the quote-unquote oil sword to punish the United States for its support of Israel in the 1973 Middle East War, creating the first U.S. oil crisis and gasoline lines at service stations coast to coast. In the last 8 years of his life, Abdulaziz quietly retreated from public affairs, delegating most of his official duties to his sons, particularly the two most senior, Saud and Faisal. Upon his death in 1953, a fierce power struggle erupted between the two eldest sons. Saud became the new king, Faisal became the crown prince. At the time of Abdulaziz's death, Saudi Arabia's oil production had risen to 840,000 barrels per day. By then, 5 great oil fields had been discovered, although only 2 of the 5 fields, Abqaiq and Ghawar, were in full production. Revenue to this tiny kingdom, however, had risen to $110 million. King Saud and Crown Prince Faisal could not have been further apart in their personal preferences, behavior, and style. Saud loved his expansive palaces, luxuries, and the opulent lifestyle. Faisal was best known for his sobriety, piety, purity, and financial acumen. King Saud did not take well to the role of steward of the nation's resources, and through the 1950s, Saudi Arabia's economy often teetered on the brink of financial collapse. King Saud had inherited a surprisingly large debt from his father, estimated to total around $200 million in 1953. By 1958, the kingdom's debt had soared by another 250%. In the early 1960s, King Saud traveled abroad for medical treatment. When he left, Faisal formed a new cabinet and assumed effective control of the kingdom. In 1964, Saud returned to Saudi Arabia and threatened to mobilize the royal guard against Faisal. Within weeks, this threat backfired. On March 28, 1964, King Saud agreed to abdicate the throne to his brother. He left Saudi Arabia for Cairo and died in Greece 5 years later. Faisal was crowned king at a fortuitous time, as oil revenues soon began to grow rapidly. Thanks to Faisal's frugal principles and increasing oil flows, the financial crisis that he inherited soon faded into historical oblivion. Saudi Arabia was on the way to becoming a financial superpower. In the first month of his reign, Faisal appointed his half-brother Khalid as the new crown prince. Another half-brother, Sultan, became the Minister of Defense. Zaki Yamani became the Minister of Oil and Petroleum, replacing al-Tariqi, who had served in the role since 1960. Al-Tariqi is still credited as one of the originators of OPEC, the now famous organization. King Faisal played a unique role in Saudi Arabia's history, and his untimely death in 1975 was seen as a tragedy. Unlike most of the royal family, Faisal had traveled extensively by the time he became king. He visited the USSR in 1934. He first visited the United States in 1943. And he led the Saudi delegation to the UN conference in 1945. King Faisal ruled Saudi Arabia as the obscure kingdom soared to oil prominence. The sudden growth in oil revenues opened economic doors for Faisal, and he began making dramatic changes to modernize his kingdom. His advances in education, including educating women, started the kingdom down a path toward a more open society, a path that became rocky and slow once King Faisal died. History will always remember King Faisal best for wielding his oil sword in October 1973, launching the first OPEC oil embargo. Less than 2 years later, he was assassinated by a deranged cousin. He was replaced by the next eldest of Abdul Aziz's sons, Khalid, who was subsequently replaced by another son, Faoud. King Faoud suffered a debilitating stroke in the late 1990s. The next eldest son, Crown Prince Abdullah, became the de facto leader. In 2005, Crown Prince Abdullah was in his early 80s. we'll leave it there. They go on to talk about the challenges to Saudi Arabia. All right, let's see where the prices are. Finger is up 3 cents, 208. Nixie is flat at 179. Sin has gone from sin worse to sin bad. Sin bad to sin worse. It's only up $7. And Railtown is 39 cents 30. So Railtown actually, the ask is now 40 cents. So it's 0.389 to 40 cents. The volume is only 78,000. And guys, remember, if they ever get any volatility in it, who's selling? Amongst us, we own 3% of the company. The insiders have 53%. That's 56%. Who's selling? The stock has to go higher to find real sellers. So we have half an hour to go. I'll try to stay on for that long. I'll check some of your messages, although I don't see many. Ted Williams, I'm down 45,000 on Finger. I bought high. Yeah. My eyesight is bugging me. Ted, I don't know how many shares you bought, but let's say you bought, I don't know, 20,000 shares at $6, and you're down. Well, no, that would be too much. You bought 20,000 shares at $4, or 10,000. Let's say you bought 10,000 shares at $6.50. You're down 45 grand on them. I don't want to show any negativity at all to Finger at all. But Ted, now there's some risk to this strategy. One is your Finger is a long-term hold probably right now. But if you were to sell your Finger, you could book right now a $45,000 loss. Then you're in the uncomfortable position, if you're bullish on Finger, to have to wait 31 days to re-establish your position without having a wash sale. So in order to establish the loss, you have to wait 31 days to buy back Finger. Now, obviously, Finger could go up in that 31 days. It could stay where it is or go down. My guess is it'll trade sideways to maybe slightly up. But it can also go down. I don't expect huge upside movement in Finger over the next, I think the summer is going to be a slow time for Finger stock action. But anyway, if you were to lock in that $45,000 loss, what's it worth to you? Well, if you took the proceeds and purchased Railtown, for example, in that same time frame, I think Railtown will give you, and it's a projection, not a promise, but I think Railtown will give you 10 to 12x, possibly much more. The weird thing is, once you're in Railtown, you might not want to sell it as we learn more about the company. But for the time being, let's just say it goes up. it goes from 40 cents to $5. Now, the problem is I don't know how many shares you would buy. Let's assume you have 10,000 shares of Finger and you got out at $2, $2.06. You could buy 51.5, call it 50,000 shares of Railtown. I believe very strongly that those shares are going to be worth $2 soon. I would say, like I said, I would say the middle of July. Look, I'm just sorry to state it. In Washington, D.C., when it's hot, everybody leaves. They don't do anything. And we've got the 4th of July weekend coming up. They're not going to do anything. And up in Canada, there's the Canada Day on the 1st. So I just have a feeling the next 10 days, nothing's going to really happen, although there's always a risk with Railtown of an announcement that changed sin worse to sin bad, changed sin bad from sin worse to sin good in one day, SYN. So if you had 50,000 shares of Railtown, I think in 2 or 3 weeks that's worth $100,000. That for Finger to be worth $100,000 in my example, that you own 10,000 shares, it would have to go to the $10 a share. I just don't see that happening over this little short window. That's all I'm saying. I'm not talking long term. I'm not talking in it, just this short window. And so what you do is you take advantage of the paper loss and you turn it into a valuable asset of a $45,000 tax loss. And because there's an alternative idea, and there's others out there, you know, there's a lot of ideas that have merit out there. But at mine, I'm going to stay focused on Railtown. I don't want to distract people. But if you take the money from Finger Motion and you bought Railtown, and it went to 2, my premise is you own 10,000 shares of Finger. So you sell it for a little over $20,000. You buy a little over 50,000 shares of Railtown. I think Finger over the next 30 in that case, 30 to 60 days, will be worth 15, 20, 25,000. It'll be in that range. Probably leaning more to the 20 to 22.5 in your case. Could it go to that little wedge that looks interesting? Could it have a pop to 3 or 3.25? Yeah, I think so. But that's a far cry from going to 10. So if you took that money and put it in Railtown, and Railtown were to go to $2, which I think is a completely achievable number by mid-July. I actually think it's going to go higher, but let's just say $2. You take your 20-some grand now and you turn it into $100,000. Well, that's pretty amazing. You take an action and your account comes back to life. And guess what? If you really want to get back in Finger on day 32, or you sell some Railtown and you buy back your position of Finger. I wonder once you're in Railtown, I'll wonder if you'll ever want to sell it. But by the way, Railtown could go to 5. It could go to 4. It could go to 6. Your $20,000 could be worth, at 4, it could be worth $200,000 in the next weeks. And instead, you're going to sit in Finger and say, I'm down. Well, maybe don't be down anymore. Maybe try to be up. Anyway, I think when you have an opportunity and there's an alternative that has upside, why not? Because the risk is that finger squeezes up over the next 31 days, right? I don't think that's happening, but you might think that's happening. Well, how high does finger go? 10x? To go 10x, finger would have to go to 20. I think Railtown goes to $4 over the next 2 to 4 weeks, and probably sooner and probably higher. So, and you just saw how one announcement of a deal with NVIDIA made sin bad go from sin worse to sin good in one day. I mean, it's back down a little bit, but you can see the trade. So I don't know. That would be a suggestion. You don't have to do it. I understand. I think Finger has a good fundamental story, but let's just look at what $45,000 tax loss is worth to you. I don't know your tax bracket, but and again, I really wonder if you're going to want to sell Railtown once it goes up. But let's have a fantasy. Let's say that Railtown squeezes, which I've never said it's a squeeze stock, and I don't want you to think of it as such. But this report that I've shown you shows that there's 40 million shares short. Are those reports accurate? I don't know, but call it 20 million shares, call it 10 million shares short. The stock could go up sharply, and maybe miracle of miracles, Railtown has this unbelievable squeeze, and I don't know, it goes to, just making it up, totally making it up, goes to $20 or higher maybe. But you've got 50,000 shares, and you just say, you know what? Screw the long term. I'm gonna sell it at $20 in this unbelievable burst of. So you got $1 million sitting there, and you sold it. Well, I don't know your tax bracket, and frankly, there's a gap in my understanding of how short-term capital gains are treated. But what I remember is that they're treated as income. But which I mean, that's obvious. But the part I don't understand is, if you're in the high income bracket, you might be taxed at 40 or 50%, including state, on the margin. So are your capital gains taxed on the margin? I think the answer is yes. But I also, if someone corrected me, I would point out I'm not an accountant, and you should seek advice from an accountant. But let's just say, wherever you live, Ted, you sold this. I know I'm making it up. I know it's a fantasy, but let's say it's squeezed somehow to $20 and you sold your 50,000 shares. You'd have essentially $1 million profit, $980,000 profit short term. Well, my understanding of tax law, and I can be corrected, just on a federal basis, you'd have of that $980,000 gain that you take sensibly, because it's a squeeze and you think it's going to pull down, you're going to owe something like 39%. Let's call it 40% just to keep the math simple. You're going to owe $392,000 in taxes. So how does the 45 grand help you? Well, again, you have to calculate it with a tax accountant, because you have to offset short term versus short term, and then long term versus short term. But in general, you would be able to reduce your gain from 980 down to 935, and then you pay taxes on that. So you're paying 374,000 on taxes instead of, I forget the number, 392. It might have been higher than that. But you're saving 18,000 in taxes. I mean, in the mix of hundreds of thousands in profit, it might not sound like a lot. But you don't have to go to that huge extreme either. I went to this massive extreme to make a point. You could just make anything that puts you in the 40% bracket. You could save 18, 20 grand on your taxes. And then state as well. That's valuable. And then if you divide that by 10,000 shares, it's $1.80 a share, just in the value of your tax loss. The last time I talked about a lot of this, I was emphasizing the risk in GTII. Unfortunately, I chose as my emphasis at that time logic, and logic just really has cratered. I will tell you, for those that care, I heard today, third, fourth hand, that there is some optimism for logic. They're probably going to, obviously they want to get on the NASDAQ, so they're going to have to do a reverse split. It'll be like, probably be like Jeremy Frommer's mother of all reverse splits, I would guess. But if they're serious about making it work, maybe they can. Maybe there can be a little bit of hope in logic. But anyway, the last time I talked about this strategy, it didn't work out because I picked, well, it depends on what everybody did with their money. I picked a stock for myself that was a disaster. Logic turned out to be a disaster. I think it was a setup. I think all the people involved in it, with Aubrey Advisors and the board, some of the board anyway, and Chadron Financial, the attorneys, I think they were all in on a sting job. So you only know about it looking backwards. But here, I think Railtown, it's a whole different league. It's a whole different kind of stock. And so you have a chance, I think, of making a profit in Railtown, but you can get a benefit out of your tax loss. But anyway, it may or may not make sense. And I'm not saying you have to do it. And then obviously the negative is when you reestablish finger motion after 31 days, that becomes a short-term time frame, whatever, clock ticking on trading. So if you ended up making money on finger in the short run, you would have to pay a higher tax rate than if you kept it at the long term. So, you might say, oh, it's not worth it. But I think 45 grand is worth locking in. I really do. Money management. $75, that's awesome. You're going to be, all these people are going to be, you're going to be one of this whole row of wealthy people. I paid $6 for Finger. I'm seeing it as a long-term hold. That's fine. It's fine. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I mean, every day we have a choice. Do you buy more, average down, or do you just hold it, or do you sell? That's always our choice. And I'm not against a long-term hold of Finger at all. Not at all. I'm not trying to say anything negative. I'm just saying from tax planning standpoints, even with your point of view that it's a long-term hold, for this other gentleman, I'm really talking about a window of 30 days, maybe 60 days. And I think he has an opportunity. My opinion is 10x. It could be 5, it could be 15x. But I think over the next 2 to 6 weeks, Railtown, I mean, $2 would be a great number. I keep talking about $3.50, $4, $5. $2 would be fantastic. And I think that's what I think that's what I would do. But you don't have to do it. But yeah, I understand a long-term hold. It makes a lot of sense. Hey, June, how are you? Justin, I do understand the strategy of moving money, bro. But we're also anticipating Finger to give a quarterly report anytime. I don't know about that. Let me look. I don't think the quarterly report is going to change. Anyway, Justin, do it. All I can do is share strategies. You don't have to do it. I think Finger at best could go up 25% over the next 30 days. I think Railtown can go up 10x. So I don't know. Everybody's got to do their own judgment. You obviously believe that maybe, I'm not poking fun. I'm just saying it's how you see it. That Railtown, you don't really believe it's going to go 10x. You think a better place to be would be Finger going to 250 from $2. That's fine. It's fine. It's one way of looking at it. It's not how I would look at it, but it's one way of looking at it. I'm looking to see. Yahoo doesn't. Oh, here, July 3rd. You're right, Justin. You're right. July 3rd is the earnings date. So maybe that'll be the earnings will be so powerful that the stock will go to 5. It could happen. It could happen. It's a reasonable point of view. And maybe by that time, Railtown will be, $1 or $2, and it'll look like a better investment to you. But I'm just was specific to that gentleman's situation. I'm not making a broad recommendation at all. It was just that guy. 45,000 is a big number to me, and if I could lock in that loss, and if I made, that's the problem with Railtown. I think once you're in it, you're not going to want to sell. But let's say he went and bought another stock, not Railtown, with it. I don't know which one to use. Let's just say he bought Railtown, and Railtown goes up it goes to $4. It's up by 10x. So his $20,000 becomes worth $200,000, but he only sells enough to buy back his finger position. Well, on that portion, when he sells, he won't have to pay, at least in my quick arithmetic in my head, on that portion, he won't have to pay any, or it'll be essentially a push. He might have to pay a tiny bit of capital gains. You just have to sit down with a pad of paper and see if it makes sense. But let's not get lost in it. If you don't see it, you don't see it. That doesn't mean I'm right. That's great. Awesome. So now we got 8 minutes to go. Railtown is trading at 0.3961, very low volume, 0.3961, but the ask is 40 cents. It hasn't traded there. It's interesting that the ask has stayed at 40 cents. I showed you this the other day. This is on the research report from a year ago without AI partners. That's the base case, bear case, and bull case. This was written a year ago, but the base case, their target is $2 a share. The bull case is $3.60, but the bear case target is 90 cents a share. That's a double from here. That's pretty amazing. But anyway, let me just look at the calendar again. Yeah, today's the 26th. Tomorrow, the 27th, I don't expect anything. Just because good news doesn't come out on Friday. So you might have a chance to buy it tomorrow in this 40 cents range. Monday, I think around here, everybody's going to be away. I would imagine up in New York City, they'll still be at the Hamptons getting over their wine hangover. So I don't know that much is going to happen on Monday either. And then Tuesday, Canada Day, I have a feeling there won't be any news on Canada Day because I think Canada is shut down for that day. So then you have Wednesday, but my guess is the Canadians are going to be at their dachas from tonight all the way through Wednesday morning. So I wouldn't expect them to put news out maybe until next Thursday. But then the problem is next Thursday is probably when people are going to be leaving New York City and DC and other places to go summer in the Hamptons or go to Rehoboth Beach. So in America, Thursday next week through probably Monday, they won't start coming home till Monday night. So it'll probably be Tuesday the 8th before people get back to their office, if they even bother to come back. So I really don't think there's going to be meaningful news until the 9th or the 10th of July. And then the problem is, if there's no news then, I don't think good news will come out on the Thursday or the Friday. So then that means all the way Monday's the 14th, and again, at least around here, everybody's at the beach. They won't get back till Tuesday. They'll roll in their office Tuesday morning. Worse for wear and tear. So maybe the news comes out on the 16th. I don't know. I'm very discouraged. The weather, the summer, the vacationing habits of the elite, It gets me thinking that we're looking at the middle of July. But that doesn't mean you couldn't get one of those CYN announcements. You know, you could. So it's 39 cents by 40 cents. Finger is 206. And you're right, whoever said it. The earnings are July 3rd, right around then. I wonder if Martin's going to stay in town to watch Wimbledon. That's what he should do. 40 cents. Railtown just traded at 40 cents and down the stretch they come. 2 minutes to go, 39 to 40. It's only 96,000 shares. 39 cents, 6,512 shares by 23,010, which is spoofing. 39 by 40. $100,000 shares, more shares traded at 40. Let me see how many shares. You've got 5,000 trade at 40 cents, 2,000 trade at 40 cents. And a minute and a half to go, 39 by 40. It's interesting that they're doing the trades at 40 cents. And not in between. All right, let me see, Chico Ed. I asked Google AI, are Costco's monthly sales figures considered unaudited gross revenue or unaudited revenue? The reply seems straightforward. It's not a red flag. But you don't say what the reply was. So maybe it's not. So maybe I'm overreacting. So you gotta bear that in mind. I've never, Chico Ed, you may be correct, but in all my reading of revenue announcements, I don't think another time have I ever seen the entry as gross revenues. It's weird. All right, so it closed at 40 cents. Wow. Is that a new intermediate closing high? Closed at 40 cents. It's pretty cool. But anyway, Chico, you're right, I might be wrong. It might not. Or maybe you should be worried about Costco. Maybe I'm onto something. All right. We didn't get much of an update today on the shares. Let me tell you where we were as of this morning. We were 4,451,954 shares, and a little over 3% of the total. Pretty awesome. Let's see where Finger closed. $2.08. And Sin went from Sin worse to Sin not so bad. $14. All right, let me just check if there's any news that matters. And I think I'm going to sign out early because I don't want to waste your time, and I didn't have a lot prepared. This is interesting. Trump is calling for a cancellation of Netanyahu's trial, which would remove one of the motives Netanyahu has to stay at war. Couldn't happen to a better guy. I was just reading something. Okay, Bezos is married. Great. That's the news now. So the war ended, and now we're on to Bezos. Pretty cool. All right. I don't have anything else unless you do. Thank you for the updates. I'll put it in the Railtown totals, and I continue. I mean, look at Railtown, 40 cents. It's awesome. It's going up while we're watching it, and um, uh, anyway, I'll add this in. We'll get back together tomorrow, and I'll have more information. I am trying to get you to think about the next phase of the markets, probably a year or so from now, but then for the next generation. And maybe I'll have some of that again. But we'll talk about Railtown tomorrow. We'll talk about anything you want. Stay cool. Stay inside, unless you're in near the water, near a pool, and keep your puppy dogs full of fresh water. And don't walk them in the middle of the day. Don't walk them on the hot asphalt. Remember, their paws are how they cool off. And they're down so close to that asphalt, it's like 150 degrees. Anyway, peace to everyone. Thanks for stopping by.